Welcome to our special edition of Business Africa. On our show today we have a very special guest who's flown all the way from the USA, Mr. Larry Farrell, who is an expert in a very important topic of any economy, any business in the world. It's about entrepreneurship. And talking about business, we are talking about the corporate entrepreneurship. When you look at the civil service in many parts of the world, why is it that we can't instill that the four elements you mentioned in the public service sector anywhere in the world?
Okay, I think sometimes the civil service people get a bad rap. I really do. I have met a lot of very smart, hardworking government people around the world. Okay, so I want to make sure I say that. Okay, but if you look at the four characteristics I mentioned, the one that's most lacking is self-inspired consequences. Right? Because the civil servant, at least in my country, U.S., they more or less have had a guaranteed job, a guaranteed salary, security of position. So maybe the one thing that they're missing is this idea of pay for performance and consequences, you know. But on the other hand, I must say that big corporations actually remind me of civil service. They tend to look the same. They're bureaucracies. I mean, the most bureaucratic big companies look just like the government to me. You know, they have employees who have had almost lifetime, in the old days, lifetime employment. They're looking forward to their pension. When after I was a consultant, I worked at American Express Company in New York. As a young man, I learned something interesting. If I had a very good month and brought in $10 million to the American Express Bank, where I worked, okay, my pay was $1,200. I remember, $1,200. The next month, I had an average month. I only brought in $1 million of new deposits. Nothing so spectacular. Yep. I opened my paycheck, again, $1,200, the same pay. So the next month, I did nothing all month. I just sat at my desk and did nothing. I opened my paycheck, same pay. So even in the big company, you have no consequence. You know, and this is deadly. You know, this is so against the entrepreneurial spirit. So the big companies, what they're trying to do, our clients at least, what they're trying to do is reinstill a bit of that high growth entrepreneurial activity. We all agree they need to have good managers. You cannot run IBM with no good management skills. We know that.
Sure.
But the question is one of balance. How much management and how much entrepreneurial spirit? And I would say, following Steve Jobs' point, maybe 25% good management skills and 75% keeping that entrepreneurial spirit alive in the business, something like that. In most big companies, it's 99% management, maybe 1% entrepreneurship.
And very often what we observe in many companies, if somebody have this entrepreneurship mindset, the four elements you mentioned, they are seen as the one that making a lot of trouble in the companies.
Yeah, that's right. And this is another thing the big companies learn. They don't want to drive their best employees out of the business because they don't allow them to be creative and so on. So big companies, take 3M as an example, very entrepreneurial big American companies still, all right? They encourage their employees to actually experiment and permit mistakes.
Take risks. Yeah.
Take some risks, you know, they encourage. So if a company creates a more entrepreneurial culture in the company, they retain their best people. Their best people are the ones that, like you say, they make trouble. They're pushing. They're always pushing, trying to innovate something. Yeah. But I hope but after the companies, I would like to talk a few words about creating the economy in Mauritius. You know,
which is what we could. Yeah, that's right. I think we mentioned in the discussion today about entrepreneur as individual entrepreneur. We talk about the corporate. But you're here on a special mission by the Board Investment, looking at how to create Mauritius as an entrepreneurial Mauritius, but also not just Mauritius, but the whole economy. And how do we expand? Yeah,
and how to reach across to Africa to the mainland.
And making us the next Singapore, the next Bahamas, the next Swiss of the world.
Exactly, and this is exciting. I was invited here, as you say, by the Board of Investment. And the board was holding this week in Mauritius an African Partnership Conference, and they had 32, I think, countries of Africa here, the heads of the economic development agencies of those African countries, or either the Foreign Investment Agency or the Economic Development. So they have different names, but they were here. And so I was asked to give a message about how can they create a more entrepreneurial economy in their countries, creating more small business, creating more jobs through small business, and how can they do that? And what are the benefits of doing that? So this is important to me. To me, maybe this is more important than helping Coca-Cola remain entrepreneurial.
Sure.
I mean, we're talking about people's lives. And what I've learned in my research, Joseph, is that entrepreneurship is more important to poor people than it is to rich people. Because for poor people, they don't have options in life.
But they have this drive, mission
but
to do something.
if they have this, if somehow we can help them kindle and express entrepreneurial spirit, it's the way out of poverty, right, for poor people. So it's good for poor people, but it's also good for the entire economy, because we know that 70-80% of all new jobs are created by small business, not by IBMs. Okay,
yeah, the SMEs, the small family businesses.
Exactly. So we're encouraging governments everywhere to do this, to do many different things to try to foster a more entrepreneurial economy, from creating an entrepreneur-friendly culture in the government, being helpful, to having a bit of small amount of money available for startups, maybe 5,000 US. I mean, we're not talking about millions of dollars to start up these tiny companies, okay? And also perhaps restructuring a bit their education system so that they're actually educating young people to make products, to do something practical that they might be able to turn into a family-owned business. Okay, this is very important. You don't want to go to high school, and even through university, just studying history and philosophy.
And get a good job somewhere.
Yeah, those are important topics, don't get me wrong. But we also want students to go to technical institutes, vocational institutes, to learn how to make things, you know, or to repair things. These are where the entrepreneurs' opportunities come from in the future. People ask me, why are so many governments around the world, like Mauritius, and I see the interest from the African countries, why are so many governments interested in entrepreneurship today? And I think the most important reason is it's a proven economic tool. We know that. But most importantly, it's a bargain for the government. It's cheap. You know what it costs to build one highway is $1 billion, huge. But to start a small company for $5,000, and that person, if successful, may create 5 or 10 jobs, the $5,000 startup investment and maybe a week's training, cheap.
So
very cheap.
It's cheap, it's expansionary, and it's also sustainable, I guess.
I'm glad you said that. That's one of the key benefits. Okay, it's self-sustaining prosperity. Now, if Mauritius or any country can convince Toyota to come here and build a car plant and employ 1,000 people, good, that's fine. But we know next year Toyota may go to Mexico and leave. That is not a permanent economic producer for Mauritius.
And the risk is higher.
It's very high. Risk is very high. But if you create 5 or 10 small businesses in Mauritius, maybe one of them will be a Steve Jobs type, you know, why not? Maybe 9 out of 10 will be the small family-owned business. That's very good. Maybe one of them will create 500 jobs, you know. So, and they're permanent. And that's nice you said that. Self-sustaining is the key.
Yeah. Because very often when we talk about entrepreneurship, it's about the country, but also we want to make Mauritius an entrepreneur country that we can go outside that little island. We have a big territory in terms of the ocean economy. But that's not good enough. I think we need to go and go into Africa, tap in, so we become a platform either into Africa or either from Africa into the rest of the world.
Actually,
so how can you do that?
Well, there's a variety of things. Already the Board of Investment here has asked me to go with them to be on their team to present some workshops or ideas generation in various African countries about entrepreneurial economies and so on. But Mauritius itself can be a financial regional headquarters. It can be a legal regional headquarters. It's almost a natural thing for Mauritius, I think, to look at that big continent of Africa and realize it is the next continent to explode, to come up. We know that. It has.
The lion is awakening.
Yeah, it may take 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, but we know first it was Europe, then North America, then South America, and now it's then Asia. Now it's Africa's turn. It's Africa's time. Okay. Well, Mauritius is in an interesting position for that. You know, look at what Singapore is to the rest of it. Singapore is an island of stability, of economic, financial, legal stability in Southeast Asia. I'm going back now 30 years, all right? That was what Singapore represented. That's why all American companies put their headquarters in Singapore, okay?
But I think one of the criticisms that we have on the island here, we want to have too many things at the same time. We want to be a hub for medicine, we want to be a hub for education, we want to be a hub for a lot of things. But is that something that really works, or should we really focus on maybe a roadmap for one aspect at a time, become an expert in that area, and then expand? Or
well, I would think that Mauritius would not just become an expert in one industry or one or two. What you want to be is, for all industries, all types of investment into Africa, you want to be the place where you can get solid legal advice, financial security, and financial planning advice, and so on. So I don't think that Mauritius necessarily should pick one or two or three areas to concentrate on. But if you're a service provider of stability, corporate business stability, then you want to provide good legal services here that translate into Africa, good certainly financial services, perhaps educational services. I see today for a Nigerian student to go to USA to study, it takes 3 years to get a visa. You see, it's impossible. So maybe Mauritius could also be bringing African students here to gain technical university training. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities where Mauritius can be this so-called gateway for Africa. And it doesn't mean it has to be the only way Africa goes. Of course, Africa can have its own direct relations with Europe, the US, and so on. But as a convenient stop here, as a trusted stop here, and of course you look at Mauritius, this is a developed economy. It's a good example, it's a good role model for what can be done in an African country, you know.
And we'll touch on a very last topic before we end the show. We want our policymakers, including our politicians, to become this entrepreneur spirit. How can we get them to? Is it important, first of all, to get our policymakers to have this long-term planning in terms of having this skill of entrepreneur, including our politicians? Is it vital for us to succeed if we want to create an economy, entrepreneurship economy?
Every country needs to have a Lee Kuan Yew type from Singapore or the KT Lee type from Taiwan running their governments for a while. But we have to, we hope, and we have to get the message through to the leadership of a country that if you're interested in economic development and prosperity for your people, which they all will say yes, of course they are, okay, then here's a tool. It's called entrepreneurship. It is the proven economic tool of the last 500 years. We know it works. Every industrial economy in the world today, the engine of prosperity is the small business, entrepreneurship. And Mr. President, it's cheap to do. This is not buying airplanes for $5 billion each. This is putting $5,000, $4,000 into one family's future. Cheap, it's so cheap. I think that message will resonate. Every political leader wants to be able to say, I improved the economy of my country. Right? Am I right?
Absolutely.
They want to say that. And they want to create jobs for their country. Entrepreneurship is the proven way, and it's the least expensive way to do it. Okay?
Shall we expect a new book from you called The Entrepreneurship Leadership, I guess?
Maybe so. Yeah.
Larry,
No.
it was a great pleasure having you, a special guest on this show. Pleasure to have you on the island, first of all, giving us a lot of your expertise about entrepreneurship, about corporate, but most importantly, how do you want our country to be like in 20 years by becoming this, what you call the Mauritius entrepreneurship mindset and culture?
Well, I must say, Joseph, you're a great interviewer because you really asked nice questions, and it gave me a chance to explain what I think are the important aspects of entrepreneurship. I really appreciate that, and I've enjoyed the interview.
Thank you. Enjoy our island.
Thank you.